Warren, and Mansfield. These are all those cities together just to show the major cities in Northeast Ohio. And this is the urbanized area, which shows the urban sprawl, if you will, we often call it. Explanation for a lot of the decline in the population of the urban areas is the spreading out into the suburban areas. Now, I think, can you read that? It's a little off here. Just want to mention, Bruce did a nice job of going over the history of how we got into this. I think in 2010, if you're not familiar with some of the reports that have been issued in 2010, I think that just by the sheer number of reports and the activity at the state level, as well as the local level on government reform is impressive. If you're not familiar with these reports, you can get most of them online. In January of 2010, the Compact with Ohio Cities Task Force issued a report, recommendations for redevelopment and smart growth in Ohio. Restoring in June of 2010, the Brookings Institute and Greater Ohio, which is a Columbus-based think tank, issued a report called Restoring Prosperity, Transforming Ohio's Communities for the Next Economy. Mentions a number of issues related to local government reform, and we've worked closely with Greater Ohio over the past 2.5 years. Building a Better Ohio, Creating Collaboration in Governance. This is the Ohio Commission on Local Government Reform and Collaboration. They issued a report in August of 2010, deals with issues of local government reform. Both the Greater Ohio report and the Ohio Commission on Local Government Reform and Collaboration both mention the issue of tax-based sharing and collaborative planning. Redesigning Ohio, Transforming Government into a 21st Century Institution. This was a report issued by the large Ohio Chambers of Commerce from Cincinnati, Cleveland, Akron, Youngstown area. And it also deals with reform in local government for the purposes of economic development. So I would recommend those reports, and they all took place in 2010. So why do we recommend a regional approach? Well, for too long, communities in Northeast Ohio have competed with one another, let alone the rest of the world, for economic growth, new employers and jobs, and the maximum use of resources. Bruce covered this, the logic of this pretty well, but when we compete against one another as communities, we're competing for tax base, principally. That's our motivation. As a mayor or a councilman where we live, if we have a healthy tax base, it's easier to provide local services. I would assert that the motivation isn't so much healthy job growth in an economic development sense, but it's really motivated by a smaller motivation of just growth in tax base. And I think that is not a strategic regional approach to economic development. This results in an inefficient and competitive environment where services are duplicated and valuable resources and funds are diminished. We believe it's critical for Northeast Ohio to actively pursue economic development cooperation within our region to compete on a national and international level. What are the goals of the regional? In the RPI, we're focused on two things. One is strategic regional planning, both in land use and infrastructure, principally. And then on the income side, what Mayor Akers described as this new growth tax-based sharing. So though we've maintained our focus on those two areas, I'm going to talk about the area of regional planning. In many ways, the idea of strategic regional planning is really the meatier part of what we're talking about. Our attention tends to go to the tax-based sharing because it's a little bit easier to conceive of. You can add the numbers up but really one of the critical areas is collaborative regional strategic planning. Our goals in regional planning are to advance the region's economic competitiveness, enhance the economic stability of all jurisdictions, reduce the frictions and duplication of government, minimize the loss of farmland, open green space, and our natural resources, and to enhance the efficiency of government, infrastructure investment, utilities, and public services. So these are some of the values that we've identified that we're trying to achieve. Question is, how do we build an infrastructure of collaborative, coordinated regional planning? This is, in 2009, a group of us were assigned the task of developing a framework for regional planning. And we looked at different ideas. One idea is that you create an entity that has authority over a broader region and give them the assignment of doing regional planning. We felt we did not recommend that. We felt we have enough institutions and enough layers of government. What we really need to do is learn how to work together and to build the capacity for collaborative planning. So some of the elements we feel are needed is to build a community of leaders, convene leaders to build trust, establish a learning environment across jurisdictions and conceptual boundaries, and connect the dots on land use planning and infrastructure design. A simple way to approach this would be to create an authority that has overarching authority over multiple jurisdictions. But we believe what we need is to learn how to coordinate and cooperate and to develop the capacity for strategic regional planning, not by creating a new entity or a new layer of government. Building a common base of knowledge. A learning environment needs to be fact-based, not merely anecdotal. Those of you who have been on councils or legislative bodies know how often decisions are made by anecdotal discussion and then a decision is made. We need to try to move to a more fact-based strategic analysis that we can move forward with public investment based upon that. Not just on a community basis, but more on a regional basis. Change our institutional culture. We operate in silos of territorial and subject matter jurisdiction, and we tend to remain in those fenced-in areas. We need to give the talented professionals in our planning institutions the permission to venture into the spaces between our jurisdictional boundaries and take initiative to advance our shared values. So these are some of the principles we feel need to be encouraged. We need to take the initiative to encourage these relationships and methods. 3 C's of regional collaboration: conversation, connection, and capacity. It's what I refer to as kind of the soft infrastructure of collaborative capacity that we need to build. And that's a capacity that we bring to the situation as individuals. It's a skill set that we need to develop and encourage to be developed in our region. That's what I'm going to cover right now on the strategic planning side. I'm going to turn it over to Mayor Curran to talk briefly about new growth tax base sharing.
Thank you, Mike. Council, really a pleasure to be here with you today, and especially since both Mike and I come from Summit County, which we have some experience with a chartered county, and we are applauding you and any way that we can help. And matter of fact, I was with some of the county folks today representing Russ Pry, and they said to me to tell you hello, and anything you need, you've got it from Summit County for sure. In addition to Mayor Akers and myself and Mayor Lyons, who are the elected officials within the Summit County, within the Northeast Ohio area and the Northeast Ohio Mayors and City Managers Association, we do have others who are part of the steering committee. Cleveland Councilman Matt Zone is here with us today. I believe many of you already know him. Tom Terrell is here, and some of you know Tom, who has joined our steering committee. And as he says, he's a serial entrepreneur and has been involved in many civic endeavors, and now this. And of course, your own Ed Jurce, Director of Regionalism Efforts here in Cuyahoga County. Jeannie Sternad, she was the superintendent of the Garfield Schools when she joined us, again, having that expertise. She's now out at Ursuline College, but has remained. Steve Hambley, who you probably do know, County Commissioner from Medina County, and now the chairman of NOACA, as well as the chairman of the board of the HUD Sustainable Communities Initiative, which we're much a part of also, and are happy to have that grant. And matter of fact, we're meeting tomorrow, the board is. And along with Helen Humphreys, the township trustee, as part of that, rounding out that current steering committee. We have many people that work with us. We mentioned Paul Acina. We have consulted with him over the years on these issues and brought in his expertise. But we also have, and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Dr. Beyer from CSU, who has been with us from the early thoughts of what we were attempting to accomplish. But let me talk to you a little bit about the new growth tax-based sharing concept, and however this evolves for the future. And I want to echo Mayor Lyons' words. This is the smaller part of the initiative. The bigger part, the gorilla in the closet of this initiative, is collaboration, is regional planning, agreed to planning on land use and infrastructure. That's where the savings are. That's where the value of working together and having the statement that as we share, we all have more, and that means economic development. Now, this is strictly in the public side, so I don't want to get any confusion here about private side initiatives. This is a public side, and for years, outdated and outmoded policies in the state of Ohio, like it or not, have pitted community against community. And it's really not what governance is about. It's about your local authority. It's about providing services. It's about also providing those services as equitably and as efficiently as possible. And if that means collaboration, and services don't just mean fire, police, and EMS. Services mean where does the right infrastructure go so it has the maximum effect. That's a business decision. That's a decision for the region. And what about utilizing infrastructure that is in place versus always going for new infrastructure that only pushes things further out in many cases? So when we plan together, though, we need to share in the benefit of that planning. And that's where the term new growth tax-based sharing comes in. And I prefer to call it gain sharing, but it's a slice. So I don't want to make it sound like this is any abnormal amount of money that might happen. It's interesting to note that a lot of people feel that our economy is remaining flat here in northeastern Ohio, and it's just not true. We have an economic engine here of $175 billion in regional gross value, regional economic value. That's larger than most of the countries in the world. That's 23% of the second largest country in the world, India, which I had the benefit of visiting on an economic development pathfinding mission a couple of years ago. So you can see what the size of it is, but it's not growing at the speed and that other areas in the country are. And yet we have all the amenities and then some to truly grow at a pace where jobs can be created, good jobs, and services can be provided efficiently. But if we're going to plan together, we need to have what I call gain sharing. And that's where this comes in. So let me show you some concepts here. Again, there's nothing written in stone because we don't have anything written in stone at this point in time, although we were working with the Ohio legislature and the administration on advancing the concept of regional alliances and asking for the authority to develop regional alliances. So, base year. In gain sharing, there's a base year by which everything is measured. And I want to make sure that you know that as far as any property tax potential gain sharing, it is commercial and industrial only. This has nothing to do with residential property tax, if it was ever to come about, at least what we're recommending. So commercial and industrial. And that would be only 40% of what would be growth. So there's no takeaway, there's no look back, there's no loss, okay? And it is adjusted, what we're proposing, it is adjusted for inflation. And by the way, I might want to say this, that at the bottom corner of each one of these slides, and what you have before you too, is our website. A little bit of self-education on your part or your staff's part might be appropriate. We try to make sure we're as transparent as possible and put all data and linkages to other studies that verify and support what we've been talking about for these several years. As far as income tax is concerned, we're talking about 20% would be pooled. Now, that's what would be pooled, but at the same time, distribution is based upon, for those communities who participate in this, and we feel confident that over time, it will be virtually every community, okay? But we're not talking about mandating, we're not talking about consolidation. That's somebody else's issue, not ours. There's a distribution. So the fact of the matter is, even with a contributing community, once distribution takes place, you may end up being a net contributor, or you may end up being a net recipient. And you can go from one to the other depending on the particular year. And what our proposal is that the distribution is based, again, on tax capacity and population. All right? So it's not necessarily a full 40% or a full 20% contribution, because you always do receive. Everybody would participate because there's always growth. There's always growth. In 1993, our economy was about $130 billion, and today it's, like I said, it's 170. That's growth. So, next point here is that the pooling of the resources and the distribution to the participating jurisdiction based upon the population and tax capacity. The net effect over time is to reduce disparity in tax capacity. Jurisdictions can go from being a recipient to being a contributor, or vice versa. It is, in essence, an insurance policy. While it's a small slice, it is a huge endeavor to provide gain sharing if you're going to agree and participate in regional planning. We estimate, and we think that this is conservative, that of the $17 billion that in northeastern Ohio that we spend on governance, and that includes parks and schools and cities and all governance, it's about 10%. It's not the highest in the country, but it's on the high side in the country. That we could fully implement this, something like this being fully implemented, a regional prosperity initiative, that we could save approximately 10% or $1.7 million. I'm sorry, $1.7 billion. Now in Washington, that might not be much money, but in northeastern Ohio, and where I hail from, that's a lot of money. And where could it go? Could it go back to the taxpayers? Could it go into more infrastructure planning? Could it go into improving our roadways, our byways, our stormwater situations? Who knows? That's up to the planning consortium, if you will. So why new growth tax-based sharing? New growth tax-based sharing acts as the glue, and I've alluded to that already, that bind the interests of the communities. And that's a paradigm shift in how we have to act right now. Because it is not all for one. It's one for one right now, and our policies are there that dictate that. We compete on a basis that's inappropriate, that costs us money. As the governor has said, we have overcapacity, and we can no longer afford that on the local level. And perhaps we have overcapacity at the state level too. but he is focused on the local level. So it's that of community interest together with contributions and a cooperative environment. And that's what we really have to focus on, is that cooperative environment for strategic regional planning. The gain sharing shifts the paradigm for local government leaders from a goal of government survival, government funding, to a broader goal of regional economic development. And I have to think that as a region, we can compete on a global and a domestic marketplace far greater than what we compete on a county or on an individual city basis. When we change that paradigm, we'll reduce the friction between our local governments, not eliminate local government, not take away their authority. It's their authority to have and to hold by state law, but to provide a more efficient basis by which we do govern ourselves, and more efficient regional resources to facilitate economic growth. And that's really what this does. We have provided this information to over 8,000 different people in direct presentations, fully 25% of those being from the business community. And overwhelmingly, we get encouragement to continue to move forward, to continue to take down the barriers to local government collaboration and to enhance local government working together, especially as far as economic development is concerned. And we will continue to do that. So what are some of the steps we're moving forward with? That's the overall concept. Again, there are more specific items of what we're working on right now. Is it regional planning to support the HUD Sustainable Communities Planning Grant? This was an enormous grant that we received, $4.25 million. It's a 3-year project. It was from many, many stakeholders. The Regional Prosperity Initiative is named on the charter as we move forward with this, and we're a great part of that, and we're providing a lot of input and resources for this grant. And the Communities of Practice method of building cooperative capacity is once again something that we've been developing amongst our steering committee group. Initiate pilot projects. One of the things we're looking at is a State Route 8 corridor project, a possibility of an example of how this can work, although that's a microcosm of what the macro could do. As far as the gain sharing is concerned, work with the state legislature to analyze and draft legislation. And we're doing that right now. We've actually been working with the Legislative Services Committee. And of recent, we have developed a proposal for a bill that either could be added to the current budget legislation and/or, if we can't do it at this time, a standalone bill that is just an enabling bill to allow for regional alliances to form and across county boundaries. We have several of our senators who are sponsoring that at this point in time and talked about it. Explore alternative methods of and analyze what is tax-based sharing. How do we approach that? If there are other methods that might work better than what we've seen as we've studied other regions across the country and picked up the best practices from those regions. And of course, more importantly, increase collaboration with other parts of the state. The southwestern part of the state is very much involved with what we're doing and wanting to make sure that they support it. The Dayton area was one of the first to have, as far as a county system is concerned, the EDGE program, which was a sales tax, although it was a new sales tax. We endeavor to say that we consider that we have plenty of capacity, that we don't have to add another source of revenue. It's working together to collaborate and reduce our expenditures accordingly. And engage other leaders and the public, and we're heavily involved in that today as an example with this council. With that, I'd like to encourage you to provide us with your questions. Go to our website and understand that we are a group of volunteers, if you will, who are passionate about the collaborative benefits that we can gain by reducing the barriers and some of the policies that we have here in the state to put us into the 21st century. And we know that we have a much brighter future ahead of us, and we thank you very much.
Thank you. Questions?
Madam Chair,
Mr. Germana? I'm sorry, this is your...
that's okay. Mayor, the Minneapolis experiment, actually, the plan is something that I know your committee explored. Can you explain some of the positive things that happened with the Minneapolis plan and the fact that we had all these governments, but there was not any consolidation?
Yes. Thank you very much for the question. The Minneapolis plan was one of the three that we focused on. We looked at all plans across the country, including the Louisville, Kentucky, and the Jefferson County consolidation. We looked at Indianapolis. We looked at the Meadowlands of New Jersey and their plan. We looked at Pittsburgh and their asset sharing plan, which has been very successful. Again, though, Pittsburgh was a sales tax that is shared. They want to broaden it to their 10-county area that surrounds Pittsburgh. Right now, it is just Allegheny County. But we studied it in depth. We studied the EDGE program in Dayton in depth. Again, that was a county program. It was, again, an additional tax. But we did spend a lot of time and actually traveled to Minneapolis. And we met with many of the mayors, and we also met with the council up there that's part of what they call the Disparity program. Now, it was an interesting approach because in Minneapolis, or in Minnesota, there is all school taxes as well as income taxes are collected and distributed by the state. And there is no opportunity for a local income tax. And in 1970, it finally passed the Minnesota legislature, and it was implemented as far as a new growth tax-based sharing mechanism. Subsequently, they also built in a regional planning system around that. There were 187 communities in a 7-county area. Today, there are 187 communities, but they're collaborating very prosperously. Now, they have their ups and downs economically the same as we do. In 1970, though, as difficult as we think we have it here in our area, it was worse in Minneapolis-St. Paul. They had lost many of their resource businesses, their animal husbandry businesses, and the area, Minneapolis-St. Paul, was really in a tailspin, and the region was. Their only regret is that they didn't make a caveat that they could expand it beyond the 7 counties. Pretty much they have to take the system apart and rebuild it. We have not made that same mistake in what our proposals are. 2 of the cities objected to the legislation, and they actually sued, and it was delayed by 2 years before it could be implemented. Those 2 cities did not prevail in their suit, and quite frankly, they have apologized time after time since that time. Because in fact, they were recipients and now they are contributors to that. They have a pool of approximately, first of all, their population was about 1.5 million in that area, that 7-county area. Today, it's about 2.4 million. They have had stellar growth. They have one of the highest educational levels in the country between Boston and Minneapolis. It hovers around 42 to 45% have college education or better. They have one of the lowest rates of unemployment and have for a long time. But they have, because of that collaboration, they also have now a world-class sewer system that they didn't have previously. They have a transit system that is cooperative throughout the area, and they project that they have saved on their unbridled and politically driven or developer driven only infrastructure. It's not that all those things can't collaborate. Infrastructure that was being put in that they have saved and improved on that infrastructure and saved approximately $1.5 billion per year. Now they have a smaller population than the 7-county area of northeastern Ohio when we match up the 7 counties. But with all 16 counties, of course, as you well know, northeastern Ohio is 4.1 million people. And we keep identifying northeastern Ohio with all 16. So we researched and took what we considered to be the best practices. And if you overlay what our proposal is, there are some similarities, but there are some vast differences because we had to address the intricacies of the laws and the Constitution of the state of Ohio. So we do look at that as one model and a very successful model, and we feel that we now have the ability to look at best practices, not make some of the same mistakes, and to gain even better for the future. I hope that answers your question.
Well, thank you. Madam Chair, can I continue? I think the other thing that is important is the size of the Regional Prosperity Initiative is the 16 counties. So some would arguably say that that's too large a region. We think in Cuyahoga County that it's Cuyahoga County and our surrounding counties would be large enough. Can you go into why the 13 or 16 counties makes more sense than having it a smaller 5 or 7 county cooperative?
Well, I'm sure that my colleagues can answer this as well as I do, but I'll take the first crack at it. We want to mirror what is considered to be our region. And our region is identified by a number of different organizations, such as, and especially Team NEO, and the Fund for Economic Future, and other entities. When a few years back, when the Voices and Choices initiative was done to get the feedback on what we should identify, what we should do moving this region forward, it was a full 16-county area. We also feel that the state also identifies Northeastern Ohio almost part and parcel as the 16-county area. And unlike Minneapolis-St. Paul, which have 2 cities that are co-joining, as you saw from Mayor Lyons' presentation, we have a number of cities that it's sort of diverse, all the way from Youngstown to the east, to Elyria-Lorain to the west, to Canton to the south. But added together, they make a full body population. So we feel as we start this, it may not reflect the full area initially, but we don't feel that it's appropriate for us to predetermine as we move forward what a smaller footprint than that. And my colleagues might have an additional answer to this.
I think that as the experience in Minneapolis is they started with a 7-county area, and now they are stuck with that 7-county area, and they'd like to expand it. But the tools they implemented don't allow them to expand it. And I've had this discussion with various people about the size. You know, it's roughly the size of Connecticut. And of course, when they created the Western Reserve, they mapped it all out, so they felt that they could plan for it at that time. Nevertheless, just because we've identified the 16-county area doesn't mean we deal with it as some sort of monolithic territory. I think we have to recognize the differences. It's a polycentric urban area, and we have to deal with it recognizing those things. But you know, there are some who argue that we should be thinking regionally from Chicago to Pittsburgh. So there are different ways of looking at regional thinking that some of which would be Cuyahoga County and the surrounding counties, some of which would be the 77 corridor from Cleveland to Canton, some of which would be all of Northeast Ohio. I think we have to be flexible with the way we think of it, but I don't think we should be limited in the initial way that we think of this just to those narrow boundaries are the ones we're familiar with. I think there are possibilities that we should be open to, even if it's not a short-term possibility. So that's the way I look at it. I add one thing to the discussion. You asked the question about the experience in Minneapolis. One thing that I was impressed with that they did in Minneapolis, in 1970 they created what they called the Met Council. The state legislature created the Met Council, which was a planning entity for the 7-county area. And the mandate for the Met Council was to do a comprehensive land use plan for the entire region. Each community was required to do a comprehensive plan once every 10 years. They submit it to the Met Council, and the Met Council gives feedback to the local communities. So what they did was to implement a conversation from the regional perspective to the local perspective. They didn't create a bottom-down or bottom-up or top-down planning system. They created a conversation in two directions. Over time, when the Met Council was first created, there were 5 separate sewer districts in that 7-county area. Over a period of about 10 years, they consolidated that under the Met Council. So now the Met Council owns and operates the sewer system for the entire 7-county area. Over time, the Met Council was given, they are the MPO for the entire 7-county area. They own and operate the public transportation system for the entire 7-county area. They do the planning for the parks in all the park districts in the 7-county area. There are separate park districts in each county, but the planning is centralized in the Met Council. I'm impressed by that because of the contrast to what we have in our area. The fragmentation that we have in utilities, infrastructure planning, when you compare it even just in Cuyahoga County, the number of sewer districts you have in different municipalities. There is the Northeast Ohio Regional Sewer District, but it is not as unified as the system there. And that's just one county. So when you begin to go outside of Cuyahoga County, the amount of fragmentation is significant. And I think that explains why over the period of this experiment, they can say that they've saved $1.7 billion in unnecessary infrastructure costs. Now, we're entirely different. We can't, the comparison only goes so far. I think we have to be careful to compare ourselves directly. We have to take where we're at. And again, we have not recommended, and I would not recommend an overarching entity. I think we have to work incrementally, recognizing the inefficiencies of our system and try to move gradually to improve that system.
Councilman Germano, that was a very valid question. And initially, we talked about the 16 counties. But as we proceed with these studies, we realized that several of those counties are purely rural, purely agrarian situation. So under the theory that you walk before you run, we have initially brought that down to 12 counties, because our feeling was, while Cuyahoga County is clearly the most critical in this Northeast Ohio region, population-wise and all, to have a true regional approach to this issue. We cannot, we must include the Youngstowns, the Warrens, the Akrons, the Cantons, the Lorains, to have a meaningful policy. That's why we thought that was a reasonable, albeit challenging, number to work with, at least in the initial start.
Not to belabor the answer, but also it's the movement of the traffic patterns. As an example, in my city, Hudson, 70% of our working adults leave town every day. Most of them either heading to Cleveland or to the Akron area. Medina County, 50% of the working adults leave the entire county every day. And of course, we know the stellar growth has happened with the residential sprawl that's happened with Medina. And now the cost of transportation is becoming an issue, more of an issue than it ever was before. I was talking with Mayor Clough not too long ago of Westlake, and he estimated that fully 85% of the working adults in Westlake left his town every day. So we're living, our constituents are living and working regionally, but as far as our governance is concerned, we're just on the threshold of reflecting that. of what way they live their lives and conduct their lives. And that's where we think that it is an advantage. I had an interesting this anecdote talking with the mayor of Bloomington. If any of you have ever been up to Minneapolis, that's the town that the Mall of America is in. The town that my wife and daughter, when I couldn't go on spring break with them, and I offered them to go to Florida, chose to go to the Mall of America. And the stories that they had, it sounded like they really had a great time. But we were in conversation, and he was mentioning to me how he sometimes would kid with some of his neighboring communities. Are they enjoying his tax base? And I said, well, Mayor, it sounds like you're not happy with the situation. He said, absolutely not. He said, I wouldn't have it any other way. When we have a project in Bloomingdale, I get 186 calls. How can we help? Do you need a police officer? Do you need a dump truck? Do you need pylons? Do you need secretarial work? How can we help you? He never has to worry about having to take the time to compete with another community. And he said, and if things were to turn, because we have had growth because of where our location is, I have a safety net. I have them for the future. And it was a relevant comment.
Madam Chair, we kind of have a custom of 3 questions, so. And these are kind of leading questions because I kind of knew how you were going to expound on these. But coincidentally, the city of Parma, we have about 70% of our wage earners work outside the city. So recently, the city of Parma had equalization in income tax. Whether you worked inside the city or outside the city, you pay the same income tax rate. And it took several tries to convince the 70% that we were trying to bring their taxes down because of the income tax credit. The question that I want to raise is the experience of regional planning in Cuyahoga County had a tremendous study about the over-retailization of Cuyahoga County and the devastating effect it's had on winners and losers because we keep building strips, more stores, more big boxes, and there's only so much capacity of spending, and you have different malls and shopping centers that are highly vacant, and then you have the newer ones just continuing to grow, and it's how do you want to say it's just causing the problems of haves and haves not, and really it's not giving better value to everyone. On a region, what besides retail do you think will be advantages of the RPI?
Well, I'm going to have Mayor Lyons, since he has focused more on the regional planning, the community of practices. I'm going to have him start off with a response to that.
Yeah, I'm familiar with some studies, I think probably about 15 years ago or thereabouts, that indicated we were overbuilt by, I don't know if it was 1 million square feet of retail space, and we've built a lot since then. I think that our focus has been more on the jobs and the tax base based on jobs. I think for communities, it's my understanding that actually retail development for most communities is not much of an advantage for an individual community. Actually, the cost of providing services for retail facilities exceeds the revenue that comes in. So for me, I've never been that focused on that issue. I think I've been more focused on job creation. For municipalities, income tax in Ohio is probably the biggest source of revenue to provide services at the municipal level. The property tax and sales tax is the big factor in retail. And of course, from the county perspective, that would be significant. And I think recently there have been some articles in the paper on the shift of retail county to county. That may be more of a county to county issue than it is individual communities. So I think the bigger issue is the type of economic development that produces good paying jobs, not so much a battle over retail. Retail produces more property tax and sales tax. So there would be a significant impact on the property tax side. But I think where the real economic development opportunity is in the good job creation type of economic development. And I'd say that's where our focus has been: commercial and industrial property. Of course, retail is commercial property. Those are my thoughts on it. So to answer your question, what benefit would it be beyond the retail struggle? I think there are these battles for retail. I'm not sure whether communities that have won that battle actually benefited that much at times at receiving that retail. I think the better benefit for our region is to focus on good job creation, economic development. So that's where I think the greater benefit is.
Yeah, I have a question. First of all, I live in Cleveland and work in Cleveland, so I'm one of the rare birds here. In meeting with some of the mayors in my district, District 9, we have villages and cities, and there's this problem with the ability with the village to share with the cities. Mr. Jurst and I met with the mayors about this. And I don't know if I'm elaborating properly, but because of the villages cannot have union agreements, they therefore cannot share fire and police equipment. So, like for instance, Warrensville has just had to buy a new hook and ladder and ambulance, but they can't share it with the village of Highland Hills because it's a village, because of some state law. So, is there something that you're working in that area? Have you dealt with that at all?
Councilman, as a matter of fact, we were been made aware of that, and this came to light in the Cuyahoga County Mayors and Managers Association. A specific issue came to mind where South Euclid and the city of Cleveland wanted to share rubbish collection situation. And as a matter of fact, there is legislation in Columbus as we speak, I believe introduced by Senator Turner, as I recall, and Representative Foley, I think, is involved with that, to address that very situation. Because if we're going to create efficiencies, if we're going to save dollars, and hopefully keep taxes down, that kind of intercommunity cooperation and collaboration is imperative. And that is part and parcel of this, that we are trying to work on more collaboration and cooperation among communities within the region. But that specific question you raised, we know is being addressed in Columbus, and hope it will pass.
Right. And of course, my district is the district with Randall Mall. And it was a number of my colleagues and I were out there last week with Economic Development Director Benders, and that's 1 million square feet that's sitting there vacant. So that's one of the areas that I'd like to meet with you about, because it's a particular interest to me and to our to my district, and actually the whole region, because of its access to interstates and the amount of space and land that's there.
We haven't addressed specific issues. I mean, there are issues that come up all the time that would be applied to this concept. We're trying to set the platform, and as Mayor Lyons said, to have the dialogue, to have the discussion, to develop what the areas of interest are. But that's a good example. And I apologize, I failed to mention that one of our other steering committee members is the mayor from East Cleveland, Mayor Gary Norton, and participates with us. And a similar situation happened with East Cleveland and Cleveland as far as rubbish was concerned. There are a number of things that have to be addressed to put Ohio and our regions in the 21st century. Our House Speaker has just announced Representative Batchelder announced that he is putting together a conference, if you will, to talk about the Ohio Constitution. We have not had a constitutional convention other than a plethora of amendments to that Constitution, which, it's worse than trying to figure out your genealogy when you read that document. Believe me, I've tried, and I can't figure out either one yet. But at any rate, that to bring us to the 21st century, to find out where we can make the changes. How do we define home rule as opposed to the continued onslaught of usurping a home rule from counties and cities? What is the balance? What is the real meaning of it? Where should it be? And what's the understanding of home rule? It's expanded from what its original idea was. And in some cases, it's been abused. But in some cases now, it's been usurped from us. And we have to understand where that balance is. But it's trying to get that sustainable, collaborative foundation as we move forward. Cuyahoga County, your county, is tantamount to the heart of it all. You know, and we know that there's a lot that you could do just within your own county. But just imagine, if you will, if we had the region working together and making sure that we don't have these faulty raws of building new development that only creates abandonment. We mentioned here in the presentation a study on the Route 8 corridor. Well, we just put in Summit County with our AMETS and ODOT, just put in millions and millions of dollars to upgrade Route 8. And it is, when the project is complete, it's fabulous. One of the first things that happened was there was almost a feeding frenzy for retail development and proposals, which would have only meant abandonment to the south, to the north, to the east, to the west with that location. It's a great location, but what really should go there? What needs to be protected also with the high quality of the wetlands that are there? And do we need to usurp infrastructure that's already in place? We have vast quantities of infrastructure in northeastern Ohio that goes underutilized, and it has still to meet every criteria of every regulatory agency in the country, be it local, be it state, or be it federal. How about using that infrastructure to a greater degree?
Yes, Mr. Miller, Mr. Greenspan.
Madam President, one of the presenters said that here in Northeast Ohio that we could save about 10% of the cost of local government, which would amount to about $1.7 billion. And I would ask if you could give me some explanation of what would be the actual mechanism by which that cost savings would occur.
Well, I'm the one that mentioned it, and this was an analysis that the steering committee had done over looking and working with the Fund for Economic Future as they developed what the local government cost was, as they did a survey a couple of years ago, and concluding with that research project. And I don't have the research paper here with me today, that fully 10% of our regional gross product is spent on governance, or about $17 billion. What we have seen from these other areas that if fully, and this is an extension by an educated extension of what other areas have saved through regional planning, that we have estimated that we have the opportunity to reduce the cost of our infrastructure development by somewhere in that nature. An example would be how many different sewer systems do we have in northeastern Ohio? I don't know if I have enough fingers on my hands to count the number of sewer districts. Now, it might not be geographically appropriate for them all to be connected, but it is appropriate for some of them to be connected. What's the gain from that? And then what over time, fully implemented, and I did use that term, fully implemented, what might that be? We feel comfortable that fully implemented in a regional planning basis where people do accept and participate in regional planning of infrastructure, that those kind of monies should be saved. We need also to have a system by which we level the playing field as far as the rural, undeveloped, inexpensive farmland with where infrastructure currently exists but needs to be redeveloped and the cost thereof. How do we come on parity so that we can develop at a less cost, but yet we remunerate those areas that where jobs need to be, as opposed to continually pushing them out. People need to be able to get to those jobs, and this will come about from that regional planning. Yes?
Mr.
Bruce?
Greenspan? Or-
Councilman
We're getting a
Miller.
little bit pushed for time because we have our meeting for 6, so. Mr. Greenspan, do you have a quick question to Mr.
Yeah,
Schreier?
well,
Or-
Yeah,
No quick questions.
let me just say, in as a comment, the two items that are the regional planning and the tax-based sharing, I'm in agreement with half of that. Regional collaboration, I completely agree with. Ed Juris has spent time with the West Shore COG, a great example, not the only example, but of communities working together to share resources. So much so that the 6 communities are operating and meet and have for 35 years in a very collaborative way. I agree on a regional comprehensive economic development plan, so we don't step all over ourselves as we're moving forward. I'm 100% for a free market economy, which causes me significant concern and complete opposition to tax-based sharing. There is no incentive for a community to have a vibrant economic development function if 20 to 40% of its gain is immediately shared with other folks. I don't see the benefit there whatsoever. I don't see the incentive. I actually see a disincentive for those communities that are not doing well to continue not to do well if they're going to receive revenue for no effort, for not putting forth any effort whatsoever. So I see it more as a disadvantage than an advantage. You know, this isn't youth baseball where everybody gets a trophy. I mean, you know, those days are gone. This is an opportunity now for communities to come together and collaborate, but not share revenue. They can share in the prosperity of collaboration. And I believe there are significant savings there, but not on a revenue perspective. What's my question really now that I'll get off my soapbox, but how do you define poaching? Is poaching, if a company voluntarily leaves one community, say within Cuyahoga County, and goes to another, is that considered poaching? You know, for example, I'll give you an example, and I live in Westlake, so my comments aren't jaded by the American Greetings issue. My concern is North Olmsted has an auto mile. If a car dealership voluntarily leaves Westlake and goes to North Olmsted because they attract the clients, you know, the people buying cars, should Westlake be penalized or be benefited and North Olmsted be penalized because they have to build a better mousetrap when it comes to selling automobiles?
Councilman Greenspan, you asked what do we mean by poaching? When I use my earlier example, when Solon, if they were the example, were to offer tax incentives, tax abatements, and other economic benefits for which it's going to move from, say, Euclid to Solon, that's poaching. Solon gains, Euclid loses. It is not healthy, whether it's Cuyahoga County or any other counties, but let's use Cuyahoga County here. It is not healthy for the overall county to have Solon that much more prosperous and Euclid that much more suffering. So the poaching idea, or the revenue sharing idea was, okay, for whatever reason that the widgets company wants to move to Solon, fine. But if the incentive and if the poaching part or the incentive part by Solon is to get them there and Euclid loses, that doesn't help the community. We're trying to come up with a plan here that will benefit the entire region, realizing that the widgets companies are going to move. So so an incentive or an aggressive, proactive part on the part of one community to take from another community, that helps one community, it hurts the other one. We're trying to avoid that.
Well, how do you answer the argument that company was going to leave the region unless someone else stepped up to the plate locally to stay here? Because I've only been here 4 years, and I could tell you it's happened. We're all well aware of it. And I come from an environment where we had businesses driving into our community, looking for incentives in order to help sustain their bottom line. If somebody's looking to leave Northeast Ohio, why would not another community be interested in retaining them and keeping them here? Then if you want to talk about from a county-wide global perspective, those tax dollars and those employees and the revenue and the business and so forth is still staying within the county.
Well, there's a couple of assumptions, Councilman, that you made, and I wanted to allude to that. First of all, it should be a regional process to keep regional businesses here. Yes, our current system did require a Westlake or a Beechwood or an Independence to participate, as well as Brooklyn, in that particular scenario that you provided. Unfortunately, and this is something we're trying to resolve and solve in Summit County right now as we look for the bigger, broader program through the Jobs Preservation Act that our communities have joined into. To allow a community to get through those first years when the tax dollars drop right off the face of the earth, if you will. Now, that's one issue. There's no one that believes in the free enterprise system more than I do and more than Hudson does. As a matter of fact, we're the home of the Burton D. Morgan Foundation, which was founded for the free enterprise system and to develop the free enterprise system. But where does the free enterprise system, and the free enterprise system in the private market is absolutely appropriate. In the public market, it creates waste and overcapacity. It has to be balanced. We need to compete, but not with ourselves on that degree. And as far as gain sharing is concerned, it is a small slice. And when you say tax sharing, everybody backs off, steps up, don't take mine. It has no takeaway. And when we did the modeling, which I don't have the time here to share with you, we're talking really about 0.5% perhaps on average. 0.5%. And here's the big kicker. In every regional study that we did, the growth was enhanced anywhere from 4 to 8% over what they were seeing previously. We're suggesting that we'll see a 2.5 to 5% once it's fully applied. That takes the curve from this to this, and everybody gains from it. Everybody has to participate in that as a region. So a little sharing provides a whole lot of ownership for everybody on this, and it's a minor part. It's not a takeaway. But I'd love to have further discussions with you on that because that's where we need to understand where the free enterprise system fits in best and how we can nurture it on the government side and create the atmosphere for the free enterprise system to flourish.
Thank you for your, Mr. Schron has a quick comment, and Ms. Simon, we really want to stay on our 6 o'clock meeting.
And I agree with Mr. Greenspan's comments that the two seem to get merged together, the tax issue and the efficiency of government. And I don't believe they necessarily always have to be in the same conversation. They can be mutually exclusive, I truly believe, because I just came from hearing some of the top economists in the country, and we're not losing business to one part of this county to another, folks. If you look at where our dramatic drop is, we are in the bottom. We're the number 3 or 3rd state in the bottom. So far off the chart as far as loss of jobs and people, and we're only losing to Michigan and New York. So we're the 47th state, and we're losing to Texas and to Florida, folks. And that's the competition. That's the free enterprise. It's not worried about what's going to any one of our communities here in these 16 counties, folks. It's that there is a heck of an incentive for businesses to leave here and then also to go all the way across the pond. And I mean, that's the reality of why these things are happening. And so I think even though it's only a small piece, it becomes part of the dialogue. And I think that don't get the two mixed into the same dialogue. Let's get the efficiency of government, because I agree that that's where the big dollars are going to result. And a single water department for the entire 16 counties, a single sewer department. You know, those are where massive savings can be taking place.
Oh, absolutely, sir. And we concur with you. What we say is that we need to compete domestically and globally. And at this point in time, we don't have that venue. And if we're going to compete and cooperate and compete in that arena, then we all need to have some sort of a basis by which to have the gain share.
But the competition is probably with Texas and Florida. It's
We-
not,
we
it's not
recognize-
with internally.
But we spend a lot of time protecting our territories.
All right, Ms. Simon, very quickly, because we're trying to stay on schedule.
Chair, just a final comment that we're in a prime position as a new county government, a county council, to promote and see that some of these ideas are put into action. I'm going to ask my colleagues to consider what legislation we can bring forward. I'm working on the Planning Commission. I'm going to work to bring things to us and look at what, if anything, Summit's done in terms of these concepts. And in terms of my colleague Greenspan, I appreciate your comment, but guess what? Westlake might be next, because it might be Avon Lake, it might be Lorraine County that starts to take the it's outward migration, and they're going to walk right through Westlake next, and then I think you'll be maybe by having a different opinion on this. So, it's something we've got to bring back to the center, and this is where we're going to start. So I appreciate this, Councilman Germana, and the opportunity to hear this presentation, and maybe we can meet again.
Wait, thank you, Mr. Germana, for bringing this. He's
Madam
done
Chair.
he's in the Intergovernmental Committee, has done a fantastic job, and we appreciate
I
it.
just wanted to bring up the fact that, now the interest is there, and I'm going to be working with Edgers to kind of schedule some different topics that we could have for Intergovernmental Relations Committee.
Right, thank you.
Madam Chair. And
Right, thank
thank you for that fine presentation.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. Is there a motion to adjourn our committee of the whole? Moved by Mr. Miller, seconded by Mr. Schrein. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Opposed? All right, the work session is now adjourned. And does everyone have their materials for the,
All this waste, all this waste, you gotta get rid of these.
I know. Oh,
Drink
all right, I
that
got
lake.
one.